In this section, we're going to talk about idea validation, and we're going to get into MVP, minimum viable product, which is kind of the heart and soul of an agile and lean product process. This section is an overview of 3 validation activities, goes into detail on idea validation, and introduces the minimum viable product. Idea, prototype, and build validation activities give product leaders concrete ways to narrow product options and deliver a product using lean resources. They occur consecutively throughout the build process. As a rule of thumb, product leaders should budget half of their time on these validation activities. This is a graphical view of 3 of these activities. Each story begins with a hypothesis, a best guess. Each story is then tested for customer value before it moves on. The later the validation occurs, the more resources are needed. Low-cost conversations progress to relatively more expensive prototyping and on to the most expensive validation, product builds. Stories that make it through all 3 filters become part of the product. In the first of these 3 validations, idea, the product leader works within the customer sphere. They interact with the visionary and customers to develop a preliminary idea of exactly what the product is going to be, or what they think it's going to be, actually. Before we move on, let's further define what we mean by customers. Customers, users, and personas are different descriptions of someone who needs your product. Here's some descriptions of these terms. So customer is a generic term for someone with problems that your product will solve. A user is sometimes used interchangeably with customer, typically the same as a customer in B2C products, but may differ from a customer with B2B products. In B2B, the customer is typically the buyer of the product, and the user is actually the hands-on person with the product. A persona is originated in the user design, user experience practice, and it uses specific language to describe the user of the product. So for example, a generic customer description is parent of an elementary school child. The persona of this would be female parent of an elementary school child, K1 through K4, in the San Diego School District. So the persona is much more specific. Throughout this training, customer is almost always used as a placeholder for any of these 3 terms. You begin the idea validation process by targeting customers, finding their problems, and synthesizing solution. This slide shows a few of the many sources of customer needs discovery. Customer conversations, bug reports, enhancement requests, site visits, game discovery, web analytics, win-loss analysis. This is just a few of the possible sources for your needs. When the idea passes through validation, the output of this discovery process is a story made up of solution, need, value, and customer components. Customer requests are a high-value source of customer ideas that typically don't get enough attention. These are invaluable for new product ideas that keep your product aligned with the market. So on a personal note, last year I was an early beta tester for a lightweight CRM program called Nimble. They responded to every mail feedback that I sent them, and sometimes weeks later when they informed me the fix was complete. I felt that they cared about my suggestions, so I kept giving them. This diagram shows a workflow to capture and utilize these within your organization. Inside and outside requests are channeled into one place. They should carry equal weight and evaluated on the exact same criteria. The requests are captured and triaged for disposition. Simple bugs are worked in development without a product leader involvement. Larger problems go to the product leader for use in future development cycles. So if you give your customers permission to complain, this maximizes this very important feedback. So how does this compare to your organization? I want to introduce the term MVP, or minimum viable product. The MVP predicts what features and customers define the next product increment. For startup products that begin without any features, the product increment goes from no functionality to a target MVP. So while the term MVP came from the startup world, it can also apply to established products that are going from version 10 to version 11. Existing products have to add a new set of features to enlarge the customer base or add revenue with minimal resources. You may want to call this minimum viable increment, MVI, if you prefer to reserve the term MVP for new products. The MVP conserves resources by defining the minimum amount of functionality needed for a product to catch on with the new customer target. In setting the MVP, project cost is just as important as features. If a project runs out of money, it will probably fail. For startups, this could result in business failure. For established companies with multiple products, it can mean the end of the product and have serious impact on the financial health of the business. A product leader's main task on the road to MVP is to contract product features. So to begin the process, product ideas are gathered from the inside and outside customers, as well as competitors. This results in the widest range of potential product functionality. The first contraction happens when a vision is applied. Product features that don't fit are eliminated from the MVP. After the vision contraction, the product narrows from one of the three validation activities: idea, prototype, and build, as they go through those three filters. The build validation creates small test releases before the MVP and as part of the MVP while it gains traction. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later. So notice all the work that should happen in the pre-build section. Using inexpensive ways to contract a product before it's built keeps the cost down and the process lean. Now, as an example of this contraction, let's take a look at KidsAm, which is a B2C startup in San Diego. Their goal is to provide a way for parents with elementary-age children to find other kids with similar after-school interests and to help coordinate these activities. So this table shows their original list of 24 brainstormed ideas, the broadest range of ideas before any contraction begins. So there's no need to look at all of this in detail, just note the length of the list. This was their list after contracting using idea validation. These 6 features remained in as their potential MVP. As the product features narrow, the product appeals to fewer customers. Conversely, when a specific type of customer is dropped as a target, fewer features needed to be in the product. The customer and product bases are tightly connected and can't be separated. After the contraction is complete, what remains are the most narrowed set of customers, early adopters. So this corresponds to the most narrowed set of product features, the MVP. Example, you want to create a product for editing pictures that is easy to learn. So by eliminating the advanced features, you no longer are targeting professional customers. So they're going to continue to use something like Photoshop. Now on the customer side, when you eliminate professionals as target customers, then you no longer require the advanced editing features. Now this diagram is now officially over busy, but don't worry, I'll talk you through it so it all makes sense. With the MVP established, the product leader exposes it first to the market. These first customers are early adopters who are very enthusiastic about your product, like to be on the cutting edge of technology, and are tolerant of the rough edges in the product. In other words, small bugs. If the product is properly aligned with early adopters, the customer base will grow. If not, the MVP must be adjusted and tried again. After the MVP attracts enough early adopters at a sustainable rate, and we'll talk about this later, the product is now ready for expansion. A new persona is targeted that adds to your customer base. The honey to attract this new group are new features and product functionality. Now, after each successful customer expansion, new customers are targeted. The concept during this expansion is to use feedback from the working product to accurately expand both customers and features. Stepping back from the larger process is the final step in the idea validation, to prioritize and populate the UX backlog, the user design backlog, that's over in the development sphere. The UX backlog is a queue of solutions that have passed the initial idea validation and are now ready for design work, prototyping, and further validation. So as a timing note, the product leader continuously works to gather market needs, create and store solutions for future development. There's no cycle in this, it's just an ongoing continuous effort. The goal is to minimize the time in this validation, as it is with all others. As development consumes the stories that are in the backlog, the product manager replenishes them. Ideally, this transfer rate keeps the backlog at a consistent length, but it's an inexact science since the detailed estimation occurs after it moves over into the development sphere. So how do I start using this? Review your product for their current contraction, expansion position, and determine what the next phase is going to be. And always remember to minimize the resources while you're contracting to the MVP in order to keep it lean.